Welcome to RED35, and today we are looking at the SiOnyx Aurora, the action camera with true night vision capabilities. In 2018, I was reading some photo magazines and then I came across this company called SiOnyx. They were touting an action camera with true night vision capabilities. So that got me super excited, and I took the liberty in contacting them. They were super kind and kind enough to send me a sample, and here it is. This is the Aurora, the night vision action camera. So, as a photographer, of course, I want to see what this true night vision translates into photography. So first I have to apologize for not giving you something very visually interesting, because it's absolutely freezing outside, and I don't know if you actually noticed, I was slurring when I was talking earlier because my mouth was actually frozen. Yeah, this is the coldest day. We picked the coldest day to film this episode. This is not very clever. But anyway, let's go back to the SiOnyx Aurora. So you can see that I'm charging it through my power bank at the moment. This is one thing that I want to talk about with the importance of being a portable and also fuel camera, because you don't always have an outlet where you can charge the thing. So having the ability to charge via USB is always a bonus. Having said that though, SiOnyx cleverly used a more generic Fuji film type of camera, so battery, so you can actually go and buy yourself a third-party or even an original Fuji, I think it's called NP50 battery, so you can get them for relatively cheap. So even though the battery doesn't last too long, but at least you can charge it via USB or having a spare battery. So with the USB charging and also portability out of the way, let's look at the sensor. Right, this guy uses the similar sort of 1-inch type CMOS sensor, but the difference is, while most of the 1-inch sensors out there are relatively high resolution, which means you can capture up to 20 megapixel stills and 4K videos, and this thing doesn't do any of that, and in fact it's very, very low by comparison, because it shoots like 1 megapixel still and 720p videos up to 60 frames per second. So it isn't exactly, how would I put it, in today's world, a bit low tech. But this thing isn't built for that though. This thing is built for low light shooting, so that's why they want to reduce the megapixel count for the pixels to absorb more light. Hence the night vision, because it also has the IR filter remove. So which means when you switch into the night mode, you can practically see in pitch black, especially when you use an IR flashlight. Talking about night mode, well, this guy has 3 different modes you can select. So, first of all, in night mode, I already mentioned, basically it will switch the lens into maximum aperture at 1.4, so to obviously get more lights in, and also have the IR filter removed, so it makes the sensor more sensitive to infrared. That means that you can actually see in pitch black as long as you've got infrared shining on it, or even in under just direct moonlight, you can actually see things quite clearly, which is actually quite amazing for that sort of thing. In twilight mode, it will reduce the aperture down to f2, but in that case, the IR filter will be enabled again, so you won't get the same sort of like low light capabilities. Even if you wish to shine the IR flashlight on anything, it won't change a thing. But other than that, it's pretty good for sunset or even just general low light stuff. You want to see color, because the colors are actually quite accurate. And in daytime mode, as the name suggests, so that in bright daylight or even just normal cloudy days, you switch on that will reduce the aperture down to 5.6. That way, you're not letting too much light into the sensor and kill it, basically. So it's actually very, very good. But I think that, because since this not an exactly high resolution video or still enable sensor, so like I think that, you know, in normal daytime mode, is if you want to record something more meaningful or better quality, it's probably better to use, you know, a generic camera. Even your smartphone might be better than that. But I think what makes this camera shine is when it's in pitch black, basically, because you can turn on that night vision mode and you'll be just amazed. The unique shape of this little guy here, and one thing I do want to praise is the EVF, because it's lovely to see. It's OLED. People like OLED these days, I guess, and then so it's very vibrant. The color is very punchy, very sharp, and don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's very high resolution, but it's good for its size because it's not exactly that big. And I would like it to be a little bit bigger, especially, you know, if you want to see something clearer. Not necessarily high resolution, but better magnification will be quite good. And also the eye relief, because, you know, I'm a glasses wearer, so like bigger eye relief would be helpful. And also these things can be completely taken out. You know, look at that. So if this thing does break for some reason, you can just replace this unit. Another good thing is obviously it seals the battery which houses inside the body, and also the micro SD card, because you can see the gasket here, so it actually seals off, because like I mentioned, it's IP67 rating, so it, you know, some sort of weather sealness. So yeah, once you click it back all together, it's completely protected, so you're not going to get short circuited and things like that. So it's actually pretty good. So of course this is a camera, so what about the lens? Well, I have to say the lens is very good indeed. I love the lens. The lens is really sharp for, you know, however I couldn't quite judge the exact image quality, simply because all the output from this unit is in JPEG and very low resolution video. But from what I can see through the viewfinder, it's pretty sharp and everything. One thing I would note though is the flare resistant. I mean, it seems to exhibit a certain type of flare when you point it at some sort of light source. I think that because of the front element is not you know, using a very reflection resistant coating, and also I'll talk about the front element. This is one thing I don't quite feel confident, is that you can see it's completely flush to the ring itself, so like getting damage or smudging your finger, oily fingers on it is very, very easy. Yeah, it's not very good, and it also doesn't come with a lens cap. So if you want to travel around with these things, you better wrap it around, like, you know, well protected the front element. Otherwise, you're going to get scratched, and it will ultimately affect the quality of your product, or not product, I mean the results. This is the night vision camera, so it's designed to shoot in the dark, or see in the dark, to be more precise. I live in central London, so this is very, very difficult because there are lights everywhere, so it's virtually impossible to do a thorough testing on this unit. Well, yeah, there are some like dark spots in London, but you know, I don't think I will be safe taking the test shots there. So when I received this unit, Tracy so happened to be in Africa, you know, looking at animals and things like that, so I thought it might be a good place to test this camera. So I sent it to her, and she managed to take some very, very interesting shots. As you can see, the footage is rather interesting, and of course it's shoot in mono mode, simply because it's, you know, it's a night vision kind of characteristics, especially when you shine an IR light on it. So it might look kind of low tech, but it's actually very, very good for a night vision device, simply because, you know, if you look at all the technical night vision equipments, you know, everywhere, like whether it's militaries or like even for hunting, they all look very, very similar. You know, I'm not an expert in that sense, but there are plenty of articles and materials you can Google online, you can read up on it to understand more about night vision. But if you compare light for light, it's not that bad at all. The only reason that because we're so used to like high resolution video cameras, they say like 1080 minimum, and especially now these days everything's shooting 4K, including our videos. So this will look kind of low resolution by comparison. But I have to stress that over and over again, this is a night vision thing. So if you use a very high sensitivity camera to try to bump up the ISO, you still won't be able to get the shot that Tracy did, simply because, you know, when there is no light, no matter how much ISO or how much amplification you put onto the sensor, you simply cannot see anything. What you need to do is to use infrared. That's the only thing you can do. So this is the only choice if you want to shoot something that is extremely low light or virtually pitch black. Yeah, this is the kind of like the only option you can have, and so this is, I think, one of a kind and very, very unique. It's snowing. So cold, snowing now, can you see? There are a lot of stuff I like about this camera. Just to start it off, you know, it's one of a kind because there aren't many consumer level true night vision cameras around with this sort of quality, to be honest. Because if you want to get similar things, you have to go with something very tactical, you know, more tailored towards hunters, and you can, you know, basically the money will just start going up. This thing by comparison is relatively cheap, because anything in night vision, you're talking about thousands of dollars and thousands of pounds, and this is a fraction of that. So for that alone, I think it's really, really good if you like to go into the dark and start seeing things in the dark. And to a lot of photographers who, especially for people who are spotting location for, let's say, Aurora, or some sort of night animal shots and things like that, this is a very, very good scoping tool. So you can, you know, basically see before everything happens, and then compose your shot using the proper camera. However, this also can do is true night vision, which means that, you know, sometimes when it's too dark, which normal camera cannot do, you can still turn this on and get the shot that you want, albeit at a lower quality. But it's always better to get something rather than nothing at all, because no matter how much ISO you push, you know, the general cameras these days, even like very high sensitivity cameras like the A7S II, for instance, you know, like you can put up to 1 million ISO in whatever you want it. In a pitch black situation, you simply cannot see anything, full stop. In night vision, when it's IR enabled, so like you can use an IR light, just shine over a certain subject, you can still see without scaring your objects around, for instance the animal. So this is very, very useful, very, very unique, and I really, really love that for that. But negative, I do have a few complaints about these things though. First of all, the menu is a little bit fiddly. Well, I wouldn't say fiddly, just not as intuitive as I would like, because we are probably spoiled by a very user-friendly menu these days, just having a big screen, you can scroll around all the different options and things like that. But this thing, almost everything is controlled by using this D-pad here, and then it's not exactly that easy to use or quick to use, let's put it that way. And because there is no screen whatsoever for you to navigate, the only way you can set things is to basically look through the viewfinder and then select the option while you're looking through it. So it's a little bit weird in a way because the screen is so small. You can actually connect this thing to an app and then to set the settings there, which you can also do as like a remote control thing, also remote recording if you wish to basically set this up and tripod slightly further away from you. You can use the screen to mirror what you see, what this camera can see on your phone, which is quite handy. And also in terms of build, while this thing's built like a tank, it's very solid, there's no squeaks and rattles everywhere, anywhere, but using some sort of kind of scratchy hard plastic, I would like this to be more like rubberized, so it just gives you that little bit of premium feel to it. Especially this camera, even though I said it's cheap for a night vision camera, but it's still not as cheap as, let's say, the GoPro camera, for instance. Just a little bit of touches can make it a little bit more premium, so that would be quite nice. And also my other concern is the field of view of this camera. At the moment it's equivalent of 47 millimeters in a full frame term, so it's more like a standard lens, that sort of perspective. So while it's good and natural to the eye, But for an action camera, what they are pitching to, a wider field of view would be quite good. Like an equivalent of 35mm could be quite useful in that instance, so you can see more. At the moment, it's a little bit tight, so you can't even vlog yourself because it's too tight anyway. But yeah, it's other than that, it's a very high quality lens, but I just wish the angle of view would be a lot wider. But 1.4 is definitely useful, and then 1-inch sensor is always good. My last complaint would be resolutions. And I love this camera, you know, I love using it, I love the experience, and it just every time I show this to people who are viewing this through the viewfinder, they will just give me that, wow, I can see things, and just because it's quite cool actually. But the resolutions is a little bit on the low side. I can understand, I can totally appreciate in terms of low light capabilities, and you want to use a sensor with less pixels to enable the photo side to absorb more light. But we're in 2019 now, and then almost any devices you see out there is 4K enabled. So I guess a lot of people will not accept anything that's kind of less than 1080. And this thing shoots at 720p at 60 frames per second, which is a little bit on the low side. And so I wish maybe the next generations of this camera would bring out a 1080 minimum shooting at 60 frames per second. That would be awesome. I think I can live with a slightly lower performance in terms of low light capabilities, but exchanged in a high resolution file, because you can shoot daytime, twilight, still in high quality mode instead of 720. And stills, yes, 6 megapixel to 8 megapixel will be quite good, give or take. But I think I'll use this for video mode more. SiOnyx, I think you have impressed us, and this camera is one of a kind, and we love it to bits. There are some concerns, of course, you already heard about, like i.e. the resolutions, because I think if you want to be appealing to more consumer levels, and I think the minimum will be 1080 these days, especially, you know, everything is 4K enabled. But this thing, it really is unique, because there isn't anything out there, especially for night vision equipment, that you can record internally. Most of the night vision equipments and appliances out there, they're more tactical, so that they really aiming for people who are using as a scope to see through things rather than recording things. So this really is something else, and I can totally see the appeal to it for certain type of photography. And as a photographer myself, if I want to go somewhere really dark, I can see the use of this. I have been to Iceland before. I was looking for Aurora to shoot, and this thing would definitely help. But that was when I went to Iceland. That was 10 years ago. That this thing didn't exist. So I could see this thing can be super useful in that sort of scenario. So very good. And I hope that the future generations will be equally as good. I'm pretty sure it will, because this is already very impressive. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and remember to subscribe our channel if you haven't already done so, and put on that bell button so to stay notified when our new video is coming out. Until next time, see you then, bye. Tower Bridge is very nice, by the way. This is our famous London landmark. Beautiful at night time. Perfect for some night shoots. I think my mouth is frozen. I'm having difficulty speaking. I'm not joking. And I finally got it, and I opened it. Well, no. My eyes gonna go blind. But before I get into that, let's talk about the sensor. So this is a 1-inch, 1 edge. I'm still slurring, by the way. So the USB charging and portability.